So welcome to How to Profit from Net Zero. Hopefully going to be a fun topic. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So this event is being recorded. You've probably heard the lovely American voice that says this event is being recorded. It's going to be about 20 to 30 minutes of me talking, and then we're going to follow up with a Q&A. We have had some submissions already, which has been excellent. So thank you for submitting those questions. So I've put those in the slides, and then we'll have an open forum where we can everyone can come off mute, etc., and have a bit of a chat. Please do post questions in the chat as we go. I can now see it, so I should be able to answer those as we go, or leave until the end, depending. This is the rough schedule that we're going to be running through this morning. So a bit of an intro about me and Small 99. And then, as mentioned, the opportunities around net zero and what profit will look like in this new transitionary world. So we're going to have waste as a resource, cost reductions, new products, new services, jobs, and new behaviours, and how you can use all of those to build a better and more profitable business. Finally, this will be our vision for the future and our vision for small businesses around net zero. What's next for you really, and what you can actually do about it and how you can get involved. Then I'll pass over to Sam from the SME Climate Hub, who's going to just run through a few questions. And I managed to successfully fix the formatting on those this morning before the call, which is always good. And then we've got, as I mentioned, the Q&A. So any questions that have been submitted, but then also any open discussion after that. So please do get your notepads ready to jot down any questions you may have. These sometimes do overrun a little bit depending on how active we get in the questions. So I've put some time in for that. But yeah, we'll see how we go. Never know with these things. Welcome to those people who have just joined. I saw a few more kind of faces pop into the room. So welcome. We've not started yet. So if you've not missed anything, don't worry. Just a little bit about me. I'm the founder of Small 99. So I started Small 99 because I found that the existing guidance isn't really appropriate for small business owners. There's a lot of information out there. It's really good, but it's not been written in a way that small business owners who are time poor and resource poor can actually access or appreciate. So rather than writing complex advice, I've tried to really break it down into practical guidance so you can get on with it. And that's partly forming events like these where it's fairly relaxed, bullshit free, just get stuck in and understand a bit more about how to get started. The reason why I started Small 99 is that 99% of the UK economy has less than 49 employees and 96% have less than 9. So that's around 5.7 million companies in the UK. I think it might actually be slightly more now that have less than 9 employees. So this small economy really is a big part of our transition to net zero, and they need to be brought along on that journey. And currently I felt like they're being abandoned slightly. We've got a target of 1 million businesses to net zero by 2025. I really do think this is ambitious, but also very practical. We've got a lot of companies out there that have quite small footprints that could be doing a lot more. They just need the confidence and the clarity of action on how to achieve it. How are we going to achieve that? One is momentum, and that's part of this series, where we're not going to solve this overnight, but getting started is the key, and understanding how you can benefit from this transition is going to help build that momentum. Perfect is the enemy of progress. Secondly, communication, so being honest and transparent about your successes and challenges. Finally, collaboration, so working with suppliers and bringing them along with you. Reduce, don't replace. This is such a key one, which we're going to go into a bit more detail later as well, that reduction is always the best action. Quite often people get caught up in things such as replacing plastic bags with tote bags and stuff like that, where that can be more complex than it needs to be, and just reducing the amount of bags you're using overall is always the best action you can take. And finally, budget. So think about your carbon usage like a budget. It's a finite resource. How are you going to spend that? And equally, carbon taxes are coming at some point in the future, so be prepared for that. So profit, a fun word that doesn't normally get associated enough with the sustainability environmental movement, and especially net zero. So what I'm going to try and do in this session is just run through some of the ways that you as a small business owner can profit, and what we're looking at in the next kind of 10 years in this transition, and how you can get involved with it. I think the key, where this has come from really as a topic for me, is that we need to mobilize the masses. We need to get that 1 million people by 2025. We need to start making an impact really, really quickly and in a big way. A lot of the messaging I've seen out there is very fear-driven and fear-based from people in that environmental world who can see what's coming, but that's not how people actually respond. From a marketing point of view, people are motivated by vision and emotional hope and seeing themselves with a better future. We need to break that net zero transition down into more manageable steps and sell that emotional gain, and profit is going to be part of that. And it's about building a better life for you and not just trying to save the polar bears or build better lives for the polar bears, because ultimately no one really cares about them on a day-to-day basis. This is going to be, and this is a really important point, and I think Mark Carney's got plenty of quotes on this, but this is going to be the biggest industrial revolution we've ever had. It's going to be faster and bigger than other revolutions, such as the 1950s consumerism, from the digital transformation, from even the industrial revolution. We're closer to 2050 than we are to 1990, which is slightly terrifying, but it is a fact we need to keep in mind, and the fact that 1990 feels quite close, 2050 is even closer than that. Most industrial nations at this point have 2050 targets, so this is going to happen. It has to happen. And most importantly, this is planned. We know this is going to happen. We have these roadmaps to net zero. We know what we need to do. We just need to deliver it. That brings me on to this next point, in that a lot of people treat this as a threat to their businesses when really it is an opportunity. Imagine yourself at the start of the Industrial Revolution in 1781, or at that time when steam engines were really taking off, and you had a roadmap for the next 40 years on what that's going to look like for the UK and for the European economy. I kind of put the question to you of, do you think you would be able to make money if you had that full roadmap for the Industrial Revolution before it happened? I'd argue yes, you could, because you know the changes that are going to happen. You know the transformations in societal and economic and behavioural kind of revolutions that are about to change, and you can position yourself accordingly to make the most of that. That's what we need to do with net zero. One of the big topics really is waste as a resource, and this is, I'm going to give us some very simple examples here, and I think Revive Eco are a great example of this. They're a company based in Glasgow, and the idea here is shifting our thought process to, rather than seeing waste as something that we're throwing away, but to see it as something that actually has value and has financial value attached to it. So Revive Eco, they collect waste coffee grounds from cafes and airports, and any where there's a cafe, I think they basically collect from. They process those waste coffee grounds into two things. I think they do it into coffee cups, but also into cosmetic oils. So they will extract the oil from that waste coffee and then turn that into a sellable product. I imagine, again, I'm not 100% sure on this, but the cafes will be getting revenue. They'll be getting paid for the collection of that waste. I'm not sure how much. And that waste is then taken away for them. So it's saving them a cost as well. In return, Revive Eco get cheap materials. They don't have to go out and buy the coffee themselves to then process it. They're taking something that already exists and is already being thrown away and repurposing that into something that has value and is a low carbon alternative to other things on the market. It's a very simple idea, this, and I think I love this example just because it is so clear in the fact that everyone has coffee. We can see coffee grinds, or we can see ourselves putting them in the bin every day. What if actually someone was willing to pay us for that and buy that and use that as a revenue stream? So as a small business owner, if we're generating waste, we can get money from it. And if we're a company that is going to be taking that waste and then processing it, we've got an extremely cheap resource there that we can use and extract value from and therefore sell. Another example is a company called Coggin Group. So they basically do office clear outs. They'll come into your office, take everything away, refurbish that furniture, and then sell that furniture onto new offices and do office fit outs as well on the other end. It's been going since 1989. It's not a particularly new idea. And I think it is one of those, again, it's a good example of a very traditional business model that is now being branded as the circular economy. And it could be used as a very cool keyword driven thing, but they're not doing that. They are just saying, we sell furniture, especially office furniture. So they take it, they refurbish it, they prepare it for sale, they attach a carbon saving metric to all of their furniture, I believe, and they sell it into small businesses as well as large and doing entire office fit outs. So a great example, again, of taking that waste resource and then repurposing it into a profitable activity. Another big one, this is a bit more vague, is battery recycling and reuse. So this is a $1 billion industry that is going to be growing exponentially over the next couple of decades, really. So Catapult, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Catapult group of accelerator hubs, or whatever they're called. I can't remember exactly what it is. They've got about 7 or 8 different hubs across the UK, and they did a report recently about they're expecting around 1.4 million EV batteries to be produced annually into the waste market. So a huge amount of materials there that are being produced, used, and then they need to be disposed of. So there's a few opportunities here. One is the processing and transport of those materials, because they're going to be up and down the country. They need to be moved to recycling centres, either domestically or abroad. We're going to need new companies and services to take those materials and not even recycle the batteries, but before that is just reuse them and repurpose them into something new. So we're going to see new services and new ways of dealing with that waste accordingly. So home storage being one, where rather than actually taking a battery out of your car once it's only doing 80% charge, say, and then recycling it, you're actually then going, well, actually, that's fine for the application of just sitting in my house as a backup kind of storage or battery backup, what's the word, generator, kind of energy storage device for generating power for the house. It might also be we see a lot more domestic energy generation and resale for that. So again, using those batteries and going, well, actually, if we put 100 of these batteries into a big array, we can then use that to soak up renewable energy when the wind's blowing and the sun's shining, and then store it and resell that to the grid at a later point, either at a large scale or even at a domestic level as well. Off-grid power blocks as well. So there's a company in the Netherlands called Schoon, which do a lot of festivals, and they do on-site off-grid battery packs. So again, imagine these batteries in a trailer. They then get sent off to a farm or a work site or a festival, which then power on site as needed. And I think the interesting thing there is, again, they're not using new batteries. They are taking a lot of the recycled batteries that are no longer fit for purpose in the electric vehicle market and reusing them in a different application where they are then appropriate. So again, it's that you might think that 1.4 million EV batteries sounds terrible because it's that, they're going to be wasted, but it's not they're being wasted. They're just going to be repurposed, and managing that repurposing is going to be an entirely new business model we've not come across before. Equally, software. So I know Schoon, they do battery rental and hire. So they're building a marketplace where you can basically hire a battery as if it were, any other asset, and also vehicle to grid information. So things like if you do have that power wall at home and you've got your electric car plugged in, maybe you want to sell that energy back to the grid, and it's going to require an information layer between the grid and the battery on how to manage that. And there's going to be software opportunities there as well. Slightly less low tech is cardboard prices. So really interesting article I came across recently where these prices are up 60% since January. So then it's now at £138 per tonne for cardboard. I think this is due to obviously Brexit, COVID, those issues, but also the increase in COVID of home deliveries meant that just there's a cardboard shortage. So there's now a lot of warehouses that they've got these big bales of cardboard that they're paying someone to get rid of, yet it's got a huge amount of value attached to it because it's suddenly a slightly rare resource. So then it's that thing going into your business and going, well, actually, what are we throwing away that might actually have value? How do we challenge our traditional way of thinking about this item that is being disposed of and we're paying someone to come and collect it? Can actually someone come and collect it for us and pay us for that resource? This is also going to be a big step towards net zero because it's going to just help reduce your carbon footprint down in various ways as well. But again, I think this is an interesting example where the net zero thing is a benefit and an extra tick box. It's not why we're doing it straight off the bat. Another really good example, Olio. So I'm not sure if anyone's heard of this company before. I think I realized they'd reached the mainstream when my parents were telling me about it. Basically, they take food waste and food that's being thrown away from places like Tesco's, but also local cafes and supermarkets and shops. Anything that's out of date, so like the example they've got Tesco bread, that's going to be fine to eat the next day, just that they can't sell it and they've had to bake more off for their internal policies. That's resulting in around 40% of the food in the UK being thrown away. Olio is connecting locals with that free food waste that is good enough to eat. That interaction point, so when that food is then being collected, one from a brand perspective, so Tesco's, they can use that as a positive brand messaging. That's an interaction point that they can have a positive experience with the customers and increase that relationship and not necessarily profit off of it directly, but if you're a small cafe, it's going to stand you in good stead and maybe win you more business over the long term because you've got those better relationships with customers. They've recently just been awarded a $43 million investment as well to take this platform global. So again, plenty of money out there for these innovative, slightly new ways of thinking about how we're dealing with waste. Secondary, reduce costs. So this is an extremely simple, compared to the other ones, an extremely simple message really to get around to is reduce, reduce, reduce. Net zero is all about reducing waste. Waste is normally tied to increase or overconsumption, and that is both more carbon emissions but also more cost. So reducing your costs down is going to reduce your carbon footprint down, and that is also then going to mean that you've got more room in your business for more profit and lower emissions. It's as simple as that, really. And I think the cardboard one is a good example of this, where rather than just throwing stuff away, maybe you reduce your cardboard use overall, and that's going to reduce your carbon footprint down. And just the less stuff you're throwing away also means the less stuff that you're having to buy in, and therefore you are making more money. So really, this is less about any one specific thing you can do in your business, but really changing your mindset and changing how you approach decisions to challenge the things that you're doing every day. Do you really need to print out all those invoices? Do you need to print those delivery slips and include them? There's a real good example actually I've got recently I've got a new bank card through from Coconut, and it was in this tiny envelope and then just like a little card with the bank card in it. It was as simple as that, and it was a great example of just changing your presumption of where before I've got bank cards through that have been in these lovely fancy boxes with cardboard everywhere. You pull it out when it pops open and all that stuff. Looks great, but ultimately that is completely unnecessary at delivering just what is the bare minimum that you need to do to deliver something to the customer. And you don't need to necessarily deliver a load of delivery slips and invoices and all that in with the paper. Again, do you need to drive to that meeting? Do you need to leave the lights on? Do you need to do all the things that you're doing automatically and maybe not thinking about? Reducing that down is going to help you reduce your carbon footprint, but also improve your profit margins as you basically you're spending less money on things, right? New products. So really interesting stuff going on at the minute. So mango and pineapple leather and apple leather, actually. There's a good video of a company, again in the Netherlands or Belgium, I think, where they were seeing a huge amount of food waste, where obviously the Netherlands is a big importer of food. And just the amount of mangoes due to a legal requirement in I don't know if it was an EU one or whether it was a Netherlands one, but certain mangoes couldn't be fit for sale. So they were seeing, 25-30% of everything that arrived off the container ship immediately being thrown away because it wasn't fit for purpose. So there's been a company that's set up that is now processing that waste and turning it into a product, which is mango leather. So they, wash the mangoes, filter it, turn it into fibrous stuff, do some magic to it, and then press it, and it turns into a leather. It's very small quantities at the minute, but it's working, it's there. And that is a product that is now being sold that was previously just being thrown away. Vouch is a company that I did used to know down in Brighton, and they use Pinatex, which is a pineapple leather, and they make watches out of it that's all vegan friendly and really low carbon naturally. And then I think on the right hand side here is another company that's using the mango leather. I'm not sure what their brand's called, but again, these are brands that are using this leather material as a real USP and a real market driver of differentiation. Solar tiles, really interesting company as well. So, we're seeing a need to reduce our energy consumption overall. This is a really clever tile format because it fits onto the existing roof tile. So rather than having big solar panels that are ugly and slapped onto the side of a building, these just seamlessly slip onto the existing tile formats. They work with how builders are building roofs already. And also the benefit here is that they produce a lot more power. So because they're much more neat, much tidier, they see around, there's a higher surface area because of that. So they're seeing around 10 to 12 kilowatt systems installed on the same roof space, which would normally only accommodate a 4 kilowatt system. So, you're seeing 2.5 to 3 times the amount of energy produced. They do cost more obviously as well, but it's a neater solution here that is solving a problem where rather than having panels which can't be fitted onto, say, grade 2 listed buildings, they are actually, these are more appropriate and can be fitted onto it because they don't look quite as obvious and quite as ugly. So again, there's a problem there, which is we need to generate more power, we need to reduce our emissions, especially on some of these big country houses. Currently, the solar panels aren't fit for purpose for that, so let's develop a new product that will actually do it. There's a great fully charged video on them, which I'll share around in the follow-up email, but I think it's just a good example here of this transition is happening, it needs to happen, and there are different ways to do that. Solar panels, you might have thought, well, actually that's been done, we can move on from that. Even within that market, there's a niche there which needs to be solved with problems that need to be solved. New services. So circular economy, we've touched on that already with that whole waste as a resource thing. But there's a real big report that came out, I think, last month from the Green Alliance with a green recovery report, which identified several different service areas where we're going to see most of these circular economy jobs be created and then fit into a few different themes. So one is repairer, so repairing services rather than selling new. I think Coggin Group are a good example of that, where they're repairing and restoring existing furniture. Remanufacture, so the collection, deconstruction, restoration of products. So again, electric vehicle batteries are a good example there, where you take a battery out of a Nissan Leaf that's really old, and then you collect it, refurbish it, and then put it back into a house or restore it into a different application. Second-hand market, so just selling second-hand items. Again, Olio is probably a good example there, where you're taking the existing stuff that's being thrown away and just produce a market for it. Certainly, I think appliances are a big one there. Second-hand bikes, always a big market and has been growing since lockdown. Office furniture is a big one, but also building materials are a really big one as well, where 10 to 15% of all buildings, when they're built, those materials are being thrown away. So there's a big drive there, or a big market potential there for going, actually, how do we get that waste to be reused somewhere else? And it's that whole reclaimer's yard. That economy does exist a little bit, but there's an opportunity there to make it a bit smarter and a bit more integrated. Rental and leasing, so again, moving away from owned assets to on demand. Car hire clubs are a great example here, where rather than actually owning a car, to have it sit there for 95% of the time parked to doing nothing, maybe you actually change it around, so you only hire on demand and you pay £15 a day or £25 a day for a car instead, rather than paying for the actual ownership of the car to then sit there and be liable for all the costs. Returnable packaging, so again, this is a really good example for small businesses, I think, where at the minute, customers will typically walk into your store, they will take the product and then they will leave and they will throw that product away, and you might never see them again. This reuse, well, as it says in the image here, reuse revolution, or this change to a more returnable scheme, it increases the amount of interaction points you have with your customers. It increases the amount of data you can collect on your customers. It increases the amount of times you're going to have an interaction with that customer coming back to store. So it seems like a really green thing to be doing, and it is. But let's ignore that and go, actually, this is a way that we can get people back into the store at a fairly regular schedule. If they're getting through their shampoo or washing up liquid or whatever it is, every 30 days or every 40 days, we know that they're going to come in and buy it again. Therefore, we can build a new customer experience around that. It's just going to be better, more integrated, and is far more profitable, because once you've acquired that customer once, you're keeping them coming back and they're doing more and more shops with you, rather than coming to you, buying once. You've paid to acquire that customer through marketing or advertising or whatever it may be, and then they're gone off that single purchase. So again, this is a thing that is good for the environment, but it's also really good for your business in terms of just building up that return custom. Home retrofitting. So this is one that's in the news quite a lot. Heat pumps and all that lot, which I'll come on to as well. There's a report that came out saying that in the north of England alone, 270,000 homes must be upgraded every year between now and 2035 to meet government targets. That's a lot of work that needs doing, and someone needs to do it. So I think we need to be selling this as well. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of job creation potential here, but also this isn't necessarily doing it because it's net zero. It's because it's going to make you have warmer homes that are more comfortable, that are going to be less drafty. It's going to reduce heating bills for people, especially on low incomes. It means you've got more stable temperatures year round, so it's just more pleasant. And also, as I say, lower emissions because you're using less gas to heat those homes. So home retrofitting is a huge market that isn't going to go away. It's the biggest challenge we've got in the UK, really, compared to some places like Germany, where they've got different building standards that tend to be just slightly higher quality. I think the UK has got the lowest building quality or regulations of any Western nation. So in Europe, at least, where just they're not fit for purpose, they're quite drafty and cold. Equally, heat pumps are part of that. So for heat pumps to work, you need the homes to be really airtight and very sealed and very insulated. So once you've insulated those 270,000 homes a year, you then need to install a heat pump into that home. And the government target was to install 600,000 heat pumps a year as well. So again, a massive market here from this net zero transition, which small businesses can get in on, because there's going to be maintenance, installation, supply, etc., all surrounding these markets. There's a huge I want to say failure, because I think it is probably just a failure of government policy. It's not even a failure, it's just a gap. It's a massive chasm in the minute of government policy on this topic, which is the problem that small businesses do come up against. So just to put the caveat in here, if this might all sound very good in terms of, oh, look, we're going to install hundreds of thousands of new homes and retrofit them all a year. Currently, the plans for that have been scrapped and there's just not been anything to replace it yet. So that's the issue, but the technology is getting better. This is something that, again, needs to happen and will happen at some point. So the more that small businesses can align themselves with this, the more money they're going to make. And certainly there's going to be smarter pockets and gaps in the market here where once the technology gets to a certain point, it's probably going to drive itself, where people are installing heat pumps rather than getting boilers installed, just because the outcomes are so much better than just having another gas boiler, less drafts and just nicer houses, etc. EV charger installations, again, always in the news that we're not installing enough. So Shell's just announced they're installing 50,000 by 2025. We currently have around 23,000 charge points across the UK. Also, I think 2 days ago, it was announced that all new homes and offices need to include home charging points as well. So again, huge policy-driven change there, where we're going to see a lot of these EV charge points need to be supplied and installed in homes. And we need, ideally, based on the Climate Change Committee's targets, 150,000 by 2025. So currently falling quite short of that target, even with Shell's 50,000. So again, lots to be done here. I think EV charger installations are only going to increase as people realize that they can get them at work and it's going to be on the company's card. I do think that company directors are going to be driving the transition here more so because of the tax benefits around electric vehicles. That's a whole separate thing. And also, yeah, so hosting an EV charger, once you realize that you can actually charge your customers or your staff even for use of that EV charger, that's going to start driving it a lot more, because people can put an EV charger on their premises and just charge money for it. If you've got staff there 6 hours a day, that's a very regular revenue stream into your business that can be subsidized or can be cheap. You can control the tariffs. Why not do it? You know, either offer it as a benefit, or if people realize that they can actually do it and it will be fairly cheap for them, they might be happy to pay a fairly nominal charge there. I think another thing that I'm always keen to really emphasize is Small 99 is a for-profit company. We are not a charity. We are never going to be a community interest group or anything like that. We are here to make money from this transition. I'm not kind of ashamed to say that. This is something that really is, this is a big transition. This is a big change in how we're going to be thinking about the economy, and therefore there is money to be made here. So we're selling training courses, we sell industry specific guides on how to do it for e-commerce companies or for different retailers. You know, I'm planning to make money from this. This is a new business that I'm starting up. And 12 months ago, I don't think this would have really had a market. I don't think net zero was really that big. Even like 2 years ago, you look at the searches for net zero, there was not many people searching about it, whereas now there's about 3,000 people a month searching for the term net zero. So we're seeing that shift already, and I'm trying to position Small 99 to be in that market to make money from this. In terms of new jobs, I think there's a lot of opportunity around jobs and job creation, which isn't necessarily directly related to profit, but again, it just shows us the shift in the economy and the gaps that small businesses are going to fill here. So again, there's another report out recently that rewilding 5% of England could create 20,000 rural jobs. Certainly, it depends on how it is put together, but one of the very small silver linings of Brexit is that we can rewrite the CAP agreement, Common Agricultural Policy, that's it, which will mean that we can change how we're valuing our land. So rather than it being based on a very flat production of, you know, meat or veg value, we can value it based on the environmental service that it is providing. So for example, in certain areas, planting trees might actually be more valuable than having cattle on them, because it's going to mean that it absorbs more water and it's going to stop downstream flooding, and it's going to protect other areas of that community from the costs associated with flooding and damage. Peatland in Manchester was recently restored, and this is the first winter that a village hadn't had flooding. They don't know it's because of that. Maybe it is because there's reduced rainfall, but it seems likely that peatland restoration had a positive impact on protecting those communities. So again, we're changing the way we're thinking about land management, and there's going to be new services that pop up around that you can take and make money from. So flood protection, biodiversity, just land management rather than just tree planting and things like that. Circular economy, touched on it earlier in this report. Again, an estimate that a move to the circular economy can create 450,000 jobs over the next 15 years. This is really around repairing, restoring, recycling items. So again, the services and the ancillary services around that reduced consumption and linear economy, where washing machines will need to be repaired and recycled and broken down. All the different appliances, TVs, electric vehicles, phones, anything that's quite, if you're spending £500 on a washing machine, you're going to want to keep that maintaining because it's going to be cheaper to keep it going than it is necessary to replace it every couple of years. So the right to repair bill that is coming through will help with this, I think, in that it will set a framework and a commitment from manufacturers that they need to actually provide goods and services and spare parts essentially to service these over a 10-year period, rather than it being, well, actually, you've bought a washing machine for 300 quid and it's broken in 2 years. Oh, I'll just buy a new one. It's moving away from that thought process to more of a repair thing. Manufacturing, this is less applicable for small business owners, I think, but there's a real big expansion happening here, mostly in the Northeast, in very big money terms, where traditional oil and gas skills and jobs are being transferred into this new low carbon economy. There's a new wind turbine factory that's just been, not sure if it's been built, but it's received a bunch of funding to come online in the next 2 years. There's new battery factories always being announced in the UK. We've got about 20 gigawatts of planned domestic storage of electricity. So just to give, that's about a third of the UK's daily consumption. It's a huge amount of battery storage that's being built. Carbon capture and storage investment, again, so the existing pipelines and all that is being used to store carbon rather than just to generate it. Part of the East Coast or CO2 coast, I don't know how you say it, it's a bit of a clunky word, but CO2 coast cluster plans to store 50% of the UK's industrial emissions just alone on this one site. So again, there's going to be a lot of ancillary services around carbon capture and storage, supplying these companies with staff, subcontractors, goods and services, etc., that need to be provided to deliver this. And it's going to create, based on the website, around 1,000 new STEM jobs as well. So just in that area, again, in the next 2 to 3 years, a huge amount of jobs happening here. And we've seen that as well already with various offshore wind farms around the country, where Dogger Bank, or is it Rappian, the one that's down off the Sussex coast, just building that and maintaining that service and the infrastructure around it has created a lot of jobs and has transformed local communities. And again, that might sound like, oh, it's just all big companies, what do I care? 99% of the UK economy is small businesses. So somewhere in their supply chain, there will be a small company that's only got 10 staff that they just supply wind farms with a service or whatever it is. So again, this transition is going to mean that you can position yourself around these industrial changes. Scotland seems to be very well placed for jobs. I'm definitely biased on this, having moved to Glasgow last year. But there's been another report out from Lloyd's that said, because of the huge natural resources in Scotland, there's going to be a lot of new jobs created and a lot of new growth in this area. So we need around 2.5 million new jobs a year between now and 2050 to reach that net zero. And that is 1.4 trillion tons, 1.4 trillion pounds a year invested in that. And that is taking into it existing funding, essentially, and existing job creation. This isn't necessarily extra on top. This is money that's already being invested in oil and gas and fossil fuel industry. How do we take that and move it over to this new net zero industry? We've already got 21,000 green jobs in Scotland, and we're planning on seeing a lot more major growth in that, both in nuclear construction and building, so retrofitting as mentioned, heating and cooling, heat pumps and all that stuff, wind, smart systems and green hydrogen. So again, fairly big stuff, but rewilding is also a big one here, where we see a lot of the Scottish Highlands being purchased for rewilding activity and for that carbon offsetting activity. So again, it's an interesting report, which I'll share around in the follow-up email, but is a good breakdown of all the different services in the UK that where England is good at certain things and where Scotland's better at other things, just because of the natural topography and stuff like that. Good check on time. Okay, cool. Not too many questions. New behaviours. This is an interesting one, which I think is a bit more difficult to get your head around, but it is this low car or low carbon cities. See what I did there? Very clever. Low traffic neighbourhoods and clean air zones, they're popping up all of the time. They're slightly controversial, where some people like them, some people don't. But essentially for small businesses, you should be getting on board with this because it's around building cities to be pro-people rather than anti-car. This isn't stopping your customers coming into your town. It's about meaning that you actually get far more customers there. A study in Berlin recently found that 90% of pedestrian, cycle and public transport traffic accounted for 90% of spend. So people were thinking that actually people in cars were attributed to 50% of spend. They're only accounting for 10%, but they're taking up quite a lot more space in terms of the on-street activity there. Removing the amount of cars in city centres and urban environments means you've got more room for pedestrians, and that means you've got more opportunities as a small business to adapt to these new behaviours that we're seeing in how people are moving around. So that might be new kind of markets and experiences, such as food halls and food markets and weekend days, and going back to the old days in terms of those more in-person farmers markets or whatever it might be. Cafe culture and more outdoor dining, so you've just got more space for tables and for chairs for increased covers. Things like escape rooms have been really popular in the past couple of years as well, so starting to see those traditional kind of retail spaces, when they're closing down because they can't compete with online, there's new experiences that are being brought in to replace those, such as escape rooms. There's probably a lot more examples as well, but I thought that was a good one. Just a very quickly graphic, which I really like to show the impact of cars versus people in urban environments. This is an estimate of 200 people in different modal transport methods. Left-hand side, we've got the amount of cars that it takes up. So that will stretch, if you put them in one line, up to 1,030 meters. So that's all, 1 kilometer, or about 2/3 of a mile. If you put those people in the same space, they take up 27 meters. So if you imagine a very small alley or quite a compact high street, you can get quite a lot of people down that if they're not in cars. And therefore, rebuilding the urban environment and prioritizing people over cars means that there's going to be far more density of people, far higher footfall, more customers to sell to, and therefore more opportunities around that to make more money. So again, this is a transition in behavior that we're going to start seeing as more clean air zones and more low traffic neighborhoods come in, that I think small businesses will benefit from rather than find it as a threat. Equally, EV charging. So again, changing how you behave, where maybe you're sat at an EV charge point for an hour, or you're having to plug in for a longer period of time rather than a petrol station. That's going to encourage you to do things, and there's an opportunity there around that behavior change to offer an experience that is slightly different to what you'd normally experience at a petrol station. So Grid Serve has recently opened, which is a motorway services, but it's just really nice. It's got a lot of restaurants, and again, it's that experience-based economy, I guess, where people can go and have a nice meal rather than just go in and grab a sandwich and run away. New customers. So this is the big one. Two sides to this in terms of how net zero is going to gain you more new customers. One of which is B2C, so different consumers. Futura did a really good report called The Honest Product. This is just some of the highlighted facts. Around 70% of consumers are interested in hearing about sustainability from brands. 98% said that brands have responsibility to make a more positive change, and 88% said they trust the company the same or more when problems are shared. So even if you're doing bad things, if you're honest about it and you share that with customers, it's going to either do no damage or only benefit the company. There are so many reports out there around this topic. I don't really want to talk about it too much more. People really do like ethical and sustainable stuff. It's not going to go away. The more you talk about this, the more customers you're going to get. Simple as that. B2B, slightly more interesting, where I think if you are a business-to-business company and you're doing a lot of work with your supply chains, and maybe you are supplying those wind farms and you're supplying councils and all these people with different products and services, they're going to start asking for more commitments from you and more sustainability policies, just to understand what you're doing and making sure that you are not adding to their emissions. Because if you're seen as a risk to them, that you are increasing their liability to carbon taxes when they come in the future, and you're increasing their emission risk, why would they work with you compared to someone who is actually already working towards net zero? So one way that you can profit from net zero is just by achieving it and therefore positioning yourself as a good ethical company to work with. And that's going to start ticking a lot of compliance boxes in the future as well. So TFCD, Task Force for Climate Related Disclosures, I think someone can correct me if that's wrong. essentially that climate change is bad for business. They're doing modelling to look 50 years in the future going, well, we can't grow crops here if the climate change is like this. Therefore, we don't have a company. We need to reduce emissions. We need to be working with people who are reducing emissions. And it provides a legal framework for that to ensure compliance and reporting on it. Therefore, they're going to want to, as they start getting more reporting needs, they need to look at their supply chain and go, which of our suppliers, if they're a small business, aren't doing enough, and how do we get rid of them and replace them with companies that are doing good things instead? This all comes into scope 3 emissions. So if you're familiar with net zero at all, that's what a lot of the supply chain will come into. And the scope 3 tends to be around 95% of a company's emissions. And that goes for Starbucks, it goes for Lidl, it goes for any big company as well as small companies, that typically your emissions are going to be mostly upstream and downstream from you. I won't go into that now because otherwise I'll go off on a whole new rant. So in terms of our vision for the future, I think, how do we achieve this net zero challenge and what's needed here? I think the main thing is, don't talk about net zero because it's good for the planet. Talk about it because it's better for your business and for your life. Net zero is something that provides huge opportunity, and it's just going to make things nicer. It's not something that's going to be a massive threat to you. It can make you more profitable. It's going to make your lives more enjoyable. Certainly, who wants to go and sit in Tesco's car park and eat a meal? You'd rather be in, a city centre on a nice little plaza or something like that. It's less damaging, which means, less risk of flooding to your local community. It's going to be much better ways of protecting your day-to-day life and making it less harmful to both you in terms of emissions and health benefits, but also there's going to be less damage and interruption really if we reduce the amount of weather-related activity that we're having that's negative. It's going to be cheaper and less disruptive. So what's the vision for small businesses that if they're going low carbon? I think it's about being low waste and high profit. So if you reduce the amount of waste you're throwing away, it means that one, you're going to achieve net zero, but also it's going to be a much higher profit for you. Walkable people first cities are going to offer far more retail and hospitality options, and that's going to be enjoyable to be around and just a nicer place to be. Not many people go on holiday to Milton Keynes, which is a very car first city. Delighting customers with thoughtful packaging that is minimal but exciting. So as I gave an example earlier of that bank card that came through, and also those returnable deposit schemes where you can take your bottles back and then refill them, that's another interaction point that's just going to be better for you as a brand. Your homes are going to be warmer and cheaper to run. There's going to be less health complications from pollution and also less flooding and damage to your neighbourhoods. So just a summary of the things we've discussed so far. This is the biggest economic shift in decades, if not the biggest economic shift in centuries in terms of the net zero transition. This is something that is planned, it's going to happen. It's just about positioning yourself in the right place to make the most of it. We're going to be finding new ways of doing things, and that's going to provide growth to your business. This is something that has to happen. Governments are doing it. Most governments have got policies for it. It's a matter of when, not if. In that transition, there are going to be problems around, and there are problems in the economy that need to be fixed. Fixing those typically means that you're going to earn money from it because you're making a problem go away. That is, as old as time, that is how it works. If someone's hungry, you sell them food. That's what we're doing here with net zero. If someone's got a problem, we can supply the solution. They're going to buy it. Therefore, you make money. Net zero commitments as a small business owner will become a point of difference if they aren't already. So being able to walk into a pitching meeting and say, look, we've committed to net zero by 2025. Here's where we are on that process. We're probably going to hit it in 2023 and then rely on offsetting after that. That's going to be a really good conversation point that's going to set you out from other businesses who are in those typical areas. Then I'd say there's 3 real big areas of investment that's happening at the minute that you can get on board with. Energy efficiency, so heat pumps and insulation, energy generation, so again, solar tiles, wind farms, carbon sequestration, all of that stuff, and then business model adaptation, so going from linear models to circular models and the circular economy, which includes things like environmental land management to protect different areas and protect businesses. It's going to be changes in behaviours of consumers when they're moving around. It's going to be things like using waste as a resource rather than just throwing it away. So what do you do next? What's next for you as a business after this meeting? I think there's 5 or 6 key things really. One is look at your waste, go away and just look at how much you're throwing away. Are you actually throwing away a lot of cardboard that you could be selling to people? Is that something that you can do? Are there other areas that you are producing just a waste resource that might be useful to someone? What new products can you create to serve demand? And what new services can you offer to existing customers? So again, that refill scheme is a good example here, where maybe refilling their bottles rather than throwing them away is a point that's going to provide existing customers with slightly more value and provide more, revenue from them. What new experiences can you offer customers as behaviours change? So I think this is a really big one, where as people change how they move about in their daily lives and how they actually interact with businesses, there's going to be different experiences and different gaps there that you can fit in and offer new and exciting things. What common questions are your customers asking you about the environment? So this might answer questions 2, 3, 4. If your customers are constantly emailing you and asking questions about the environment, going, well, actually, how does this packaging impact on this? If you can solve that, that's going to be a really good story for your company. It's going to potentially be a product that your customers are willing to buy and pay more for. And that links to then number 6, which is the most important one, is communicate. Write a sustainability policy so that customers understand what you're up to, what you're doing, and can really get on board with you and join you on this journey, whether they're B2B or B2C. On that note, we are writing a course at the minute that should be done in the next 2 weeks or so, where we guide you through how to write a sustainability policy and how to communicate all those issues with your suppliers and with your customers. It's going to be really simple, less than 2 hours as a course. We'll guide you through the process of everything you need to do to write it and how to involve the team on what you are and aren't doing. The aren't doing bit is just as important as what you are doing. The first 10 signups, it's £49. We've got about 7 slots remaining at that price. Then we're going up to £99 thereafter. If you go to small99.co.uk/courses, you can find out more information. We've also got a measure tool. So if you are wondering where your carbon footprint sits in your business, it's a simple, non-technical set of questions where you just answer some yes, no questions, and then you get a rough idea of where your carbon footprint is sitting and where you can start reducing it down. That's me. I'd like to now hand over to Sam, if she's here, from the SME Climate Hub, to talk a bit more about what they're up to.
Thanks so much, Adam. Sorry, I need to give permission, I think. That was amazing. Really, really informative. Do you want me to pull up my slides, or are you going to sort of steer them?
I've got them here, so I thought we could do the kind of witty approach of if you just say, next slide, please, after each one to save any technical issues.
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I'll be really quick. So I'm from BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I work in the Net Zero Public Engagement team, and I'm just here to tell you a tiny bit about our Business Climate Leaders campaign in the lead up to COP26. Next slide, please. So it's all under the umbrella of the Race to Zero, which is the biggest alliance of organisations all over the world committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and that's run by the United Nations. Because we're hosting COP this year, and Race to Zero is going to be very central to that, we have our own domestic campaign, Together for Our Planet, which has a net zero public engagement arm and a business engagement arm too. And all of that business activity is spearheaded by Andrew Griffith MP. And I work in a small team delivering his small business campaign. Next slide, please. So he has sort of various initiatives going on, but what we're focusing on is this mass mobilisation campaign, which is trying to get as many small businesses in the UK to sign up to the Race to Zero as possible by COP. So we go into the summit as a world leader in the area. We're currently on 1,600 plus signups, which is fantastic when we look at the international picture, but we do want to be a lot more ambitious than that and really put our foot on the pedal over the next couple of years. So it'd be great if you could help by signing up, and I'll come on to a little bit more detail what that actually means. Next slide, please. So why sign up? Apart from being part of the solution to climate, which is a massive motivator, as Adam has brilliantly taken us through, it makes business sense. So of course, growing your business. So I won't spend too long on this because we've just had a whole session on it. But yeah, saving money through resource efficiency and reaching new customers. So once you've signed up, you do get access to a pack of digital assets that you can display on your channels to demonstrate to customers that you are part of a United Nations backed campaign. So you're taking climate action seriously. And then also future-proofing your business. So of course, new regulations are going to come in over the next few decades, which will increasingly favour businesses who are reducing their emissions. So we want to make sure that you're future-proofed and ahead of the curve on that. Next slide, please. So Race to Zero is for all kinds of organisations, and each type has their own route in to the sort of initiative. For small businesses, it's via the SME Climate Commitment. Next slide. And so the way to make that commitment is by visiting the businessclimatehub.org/UK. Now that exists as a UK landing page within the wider international SME Climate Hub. So we're running like a pilot national campaign, working very closely with the International Climate Hub, SME Climate Hub. And so they're hoping to roll this out in other countries. So being part of this is really exciting. We're kind of like the first in the world to really push it. And so this page, it's for a UK audience, but it does link back to that international commitment frequently. But at the same time, it does have lots of resources which are helpful to a UK specific audience, and especially towards the micro end of the SME spectrum as well, because we realise that smaller businesses are the least likely to have dedicated resource for sustainability. Next slide, please. So this is what the climate commitment looks like. It's halving emissions by 2030, net zero by 2050, and a yearly progress report. This is what the form looks like currently on the right, although it's very simple at the moment. It's going to get even simpler. They're overhauling it and reducing the amount of information to give. Next slide, please. So what happens after signing up? It's a frequent and very important question. So of course, you're not going to be left alone. You'll have access to resources to measure and reduce emissions. You'll receive a monthly newsletter from us in Bays with all the new updates and opportunities, competitions, events, chances to feed into policy making. There's a chance to feature on our channels, so we're always trying to spotlight businesses who are doing a fantastic job to inspire other businesses and show that it is possible. Of course, then the onus is on businesses to actually start taking these positive steps and hopefully start seeing the benefits, and then submitting a short annual progress report as well. So we get a lot of questions about this as well. It's actually being developed at the moment. So a new standard reporting framework is being created by the SME Climate Hub to make that reporting process really intuitive and easy. Next slide, please. So once you've signed up, you'll have access to this dashboard. So you'll be building your own business profile at your convenience, but then you'll also have access to a free library of educational resources, which will keep growing over the next few months and years. The tailored reporting framework, as I mentioned, so hopefully that will strike the right balance between asking for detailed information. So it's like enough to be useful, but not too much that it will be onerous or overwhelming for you. And then it will also create tailored recommendations about where to prioritize your efforts based on your emissions profile. And you'll also have access to this carbon calculator tool, which is completely free, which will then feed into your reporting as well each year. Next slide. So what's on the hub besides that commitment, which is kind of the primary aim of the campaign? Next slide, please. So firstly, a list of practical actions, a sort of menu of options that you can take as a small business, ranging from very kind of small investments with quick payback periods to more major works. Next slide, please. Next step. We actually responded to feedback that suggested businesses like that to some extent, but wanted more industry specific advice by building this sector drop-down box. So we work with pilot sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, retail, tech, and then we have hospitality and construction on the way. So we're just working with the major trade associations in those areas who've already created practical guidance at that specialist level, and then just integrating it onto the website in a really kind of accessible, simple way. Next slide. We also have lots of case studies on the website. We want to make sure, as I said, we're sending that kind of really relatable, powerful message. But if you do have more examples, if you in your business or if you know any others that are doing fantastic things, then please let us know, because we're really hoping to build that portfolio and add more and more kind of diverse stories to that. Next slide, please. Tools and resources. There's a really massive, extensive selection of tools that you can access on this international part of the website. And next slide, please. Feedback suggested that was a bit overwhelming as it was, so we've added this highlights page. So each one of these categories is a stage of your net zero journey, and it picks out the top 2 or 3 tools. So you don't have to trawl through that big library if you don't want to. It's kind of the basics are laid out there for you. Just to mention, we have a new competition launched last week called the Heroes of Net Zero competition. If your business has 50 or fewer employees, please get in touch, tell us what you're doing to reduce your emissions for the chance to win a prize package worth £4,500, and also you can attend COP at the award ceremony. Next and last slide, I think. So how you can help: sign up if you haven't already, promote among your networks, share tools and opportunities as and when they come up. If you have events, let us know so we can potentially drop in and talk about the campaign. And then finally, just helping us to find those case studies. Thanks so much, Adam. I know time's tight. I've just dropped my phone. Hopefully it hasn't flashed. But yeah, I'll leave it there. But I'll put my email in the chat in case anyone has any follow-up questions.
Speed of presentation I like. After my kind of slightly more waffly one, this means we're running out of time. So if people are happy to, I'm just going to run through some of the submitted questions. I'm not sure if the people who have submitted these are here. If so, please do come off mute and video and chat through them. So first one is, how can you make a difference when your building is rented by someone who has yet to show interest in decarbonisation? And I think this is a real good question that I've come across a few times. I think one, don't talk about decarbonisation, just talk about changing energy supplier to one that is cheaper. Typically, a lot of these renewable energy suppliers are actually the same cost, if not lower. And I think leaning on that scope 3 emissions, if they do start engaging on the decarbonisation thing, can help pressure them because there are more benefits to it, where I think more their suppliers might start asking them why they're not using renewables as well. Group together. So if you can, talk to other businesses in your unit, or if you are in like an office block, and ask, just group together and put pressure as a group on changing to a renewable supplier. And also, I think identify objections. So if they've come back with certain reasons why they can't do it, take those to the energy company that you're talking to or have in mind and say, look, we're looking to switch to you. We are a business customer, therefore you're going to get far better support because you're going to be worth a lot more to them as a customer. And go, actually, what can you do about these things? And can you help me communicate this to my owner? The second question they put in was, as a hair salon, we have no choice but to use water on a daily basis. Is there anywhere hospitality or personal care businesses can go for advice? Again, interesting one, not one I've come across before, and I don't really know the answer to it. I think where I'd start is looking at your local chambers of commerce. Oh, sorry, Derek. See you later, Derek, if you're not already gone. I think that in terms of other waste management for local companies, I look at companies like Zero Waste Scotland. I think, I don't know if there's a national board of it that I'm trying to remember of, but typically these local companies or local chambers of commerce will have access to different government schemes or different people who will give you more personal advice around waste management. It's a difficult one because like water management is such a specific problem, and maybe you can talk to utilities consultants. So I think also Eyebright are quite good here, which is a company that I've worked with, who do tend to work with these utilities companies and identify where you're using water, and they do work with Zero Waste Scotland, but I'm not sure in England. I can't think if there's a body. There's one that I can think of, but I can't remember the name of them. So that's something I need to look into more in terms of the water management side. And then this is another great question, which I did enjoy. So I'd like to meet whoever put this one in that was all anonymized, but how do you avoid feeding a Wild West style explosion in the nascent offset market, buying token or ineffectual offsets, deluding your business into it's part of the solution when it isn't, and encouraging offset firms to enter a race to the bottom? That's a whole presentation in itself. I think it's a real good set of questions though, and I think my answer would be one, I think you are correct. It is very cheap to go to someone like Ecology who do good work, but it's still quite a small amount of money just to pay you and offset your business. So what I'd probably say is, if this is a concern of yours, go and spend more money with other people who are doing really big impact projects and go far beyond just what your historic emissions are. So a couple here, Tree Story, they're based in Scotland. They do a lot of rewilding and land management. Trees for Cities, again, they do a lot of work with local companies and like schools and stuff in cities itself to help rewild and reforest, one of the words, different bits of land so that they protect from flooding. Trees for Life, again, is based in Scotland, do a lot of rewilding work. Forest Carbon, they're a UK-based woodland management company, so do a lot of good work here. And Million Tree Pledge. So if you're concerned that your offsets that you're buying are ineffectual, the answer is, well, just spend a bunch load of more money and go way beyond that. I think Million Tree Pledge is a fantastic organisation, which just shows that really, if you are serious about this, you can punch well beyond your weight. Oh, Amanda has just said, talk about the Gateway Office for free and partial advice. That's a great point. That might be who I was thinking of. Business gateways and just general locals of chambers of commerce do have a lot of information for water management. All right, I'm going to stop talking now because I've been waffling on and I've run over.